Καλησπέρα σε όλες και όλους. Έχουμε τη μεγάλη χαρά και τιμή να καλωσορίζουμε στο 5ο Φεστιβάλ Βιβλίου Χανίων τον πολυμεταφρασμένο και διακεκριμένο συγγραφέα Χάρι Κούνζρου. Τα έργα του κυκλοφορούν σε πάνω από 20 γλώσσες. Έχει γεννηθεί στο Λονδίνο. Ολοκλήρωσε λαμπρές σπουδές φιλολογίας και φιλοσοφίας στην Οξφόρδη και στο Warwick και ζει στη Νέα Υόρκη, όπου και διδάσκει δημιουργική γραφή στο NYU. Συνεργάζεται τακτικά με τους New York Times, τον Guardian και είναι δημιουργός του podcast Into the Zone. Στα ελληνικά κυκλοφορούν 3 βιβλία του, αλλά εμείς σήμερα θα μιλήσουμε για το κυριολεκτικά φοβερό του μυθιστόρημα «Κρέας για τους λύκους», που κυκλοφορεί από τις εκδόσεις Δώμα στην ωραία μετάφραση της Δέσποινας Κανελοπούλου. Καλησπέρα σας, κύριε Κούνζρου.
Good evening. Very happy to be here.
Για το μυθιστόρημά σας έχουν γραφτεί ήδη πολυάριθμες κριτικές και νομίζω δικαίως έχει χαρακτηριστεί θρίλερ. Ένα πολύ επιτυχημένο θρίλερ και έτσι θα ήθελα να σας ρωτήσω για ποιο πράγμα θα θέλατε να τρομάξουμε ή να ταρακουνηθούμε.
I suppose I don't want you to be afraid. I think that there are good reasons to be anxious about the future, and the character in this novel has a sense of how he thinks the world is going to be in the future, and this sense of the future is undermined. I'm very interested in how quickly the world seems to be changing.
Και αν σας ζητούσαμε να μας αφηγηθείτε την περιπέτεια του κεντρικού ήρωα με 2 λόγια, σε τι θα εστιάζατε? Δηλαδή, ποιος είναι ο πυρήνας της διαδρομής του, όπως εσείς επιδιώξατε να την αποτυπώσετε?
So this is a story about a writer who is moderately successful, I would say. He has the good luck to be invited to live in Berlin to attend a fellowship at a prestigious institution where he'll have a chance to work and to really focus on what he wants to make. And when he gets there, he discovers that he can't write at all. He's supposed to be writing a book about lyric poetry and about the luxuriousness of selfhood and this tradition of looking inside yourself and finding something beautiful. And instead, he looks inside himself and he finds nothing at all. And he spends his time locked in his room watching a bad American TV cop show, police show. And this show seems to him to have a message of real nihilism, and to be sending this message of negativity and about the impossibility of people to connect with each other. And he gets more and more upset, I suppose, and then has a kind of breakdown. He becomes obsessed with the creator of the show. So it's about somebody who starts off with a great certainty and belief in himself and in art, and ends up terrified about the hollowness. He's left his wife and his child at home, and he's desperate to reconnect with them and to get back with them. But the worse things get for him, the further away he feels from his family. I realize I'm making it sound like the most depressing book in the world, but it's kind of funny in places also, maybe, but it's a dark humor.
Και κάτι που μου έκανε ιδιαίτερη εντύπωση είναι ότι το μυθιστόρημά σας σχετίζεται με τρόπο ιδιαίτερο με την ιστορία. Δηλαδή, έχουμε το παρόν και την απειλή της ακροδεξιάς, έχουμε το παρελθόν και όλες αυτές τις ανεξερεύνητες πτυχές του ολοκληρωτισμού, μπαίνουμε αρκετά σε αυτό, και έχουμε και το μέλλον, γιατί ο ήρωας ανησυχεί τρομερά για την ασφάλεια του κόσμου και της οικογένειάς του. Και σκέφτομαι αυτή την συγκλονιστική, κατά τη γνώμη μου, φράση που αποδίδεται στο Φόκνερ: το παρελθόν δεν υπάρχει, δεν είναι καν παρελθόν. Εσείς ποια πιστεύετε ότι είναι η σχέση του ήρωα και του βιβλίου με την ιστορία και το μέλλον?
Well, this book is set mainly in Berlin, which obviously is a city which has suffered a great deal through the 20th century, first through the trauma of the Nazi period, and then through the division between East and West during the Cold War. And in my book, the Institute is set in on the banks of the Wannsee, a lake in the western suburbs of Berlin, very close to the house where the Nazi elite devised the final solution to the Jewish question. So this is always, the history of the city is always part of the narrator's consciousness there. There's also a kind of break in the middle of the book where it tells the story of somebody the narrator meets, she's the cleaner at the Institute. She's the person who cleans his room. And she grew up in East Germany when Germany was still divided into two. And she was somebody who was a victim of the Stasi, the secret police terror. And so all around him, there is this history of totalitarianism and the oppression of individual people. And what he worries about in the future is that this will return. There's been this moment of, call it a moment where history seemed like it was going to be ending. There was this famous statement by the political scientist Francis Fukuyama that we're living in the time of the end of history, which he said, just before 9/11. In this brief moment in the 1990s when it seemed like maybe the great divisions of Europe in the past were over. And of course, history came roaring back. We have too much history now, I think, ever more history every day. And it's also a moment when we are discovering that some of the questions we thought were settled about fascism, about race, about the way that people are living together. These questions have come back to us. Things that we thought were over history has come back to us in a way that perhaps we did not expect 20 or 30 years ago. So these are the kind of things that are roiling around in my character's head.
Και αυτή τη στιγμή ως κοινωνία είμαστε πάρα πολύ κοντά, ανησυχητικά κοντά σε όλα αυτά τα θέματα που αναφέρετε και την πολιτική συνθήκη. Έτσι, σκέφτομαι ότι οι ήρωες του βιβλίου και ο κεντρικός, αλλά και οι περισσότεροι από τους υπόλοιπους, δεν επιδιώκουν την επανάσταση και στο μεγαλύτερο βαθμό ούτε καν εξεγείρονται για να αντισταθούν σε ό,τι τους καταπιέζει και τους υποδουλώνει. Οπότε αναρωτιέμαι αν ήταν στις προθέσεις σας να ασκήσετε κάποιο είδους κοινωνική κριτική μέσα από αυτό το βιβλίο.
Yeah, so I mean, this is what we do when we feel that we're being oppressed. Is traditionally we will make political change. We'll come together and attempt to change things. But we're in a moment now where people feel very atomized, where the old social formations no longer exist in the same way. It's very hard to point to working class solidarity, say, and build a left politics on that, because the old working class has been dismantled. Many of us spend our time interacting with the world through screens and through the medium of the internet, we're very rarely together in a way that makes us feel that we have power. And this interests me a lot. How do you make change in a world of atomization? How do you make a politics of justice when the old grounds for such a politics no longer exist? And this character, he is a real individualist. It doesn't occur to him to reach out to other people. And this is one of the reasons that things get so bad for him. He feels more and more isolated, and he doesn't in a way make the connection. He doesn't doesn't realize that his problem is partly because he is so alone. And so I guess that is a social critique. That is, that, I am trying to say that we have a great need to be together. And some of my most powerful moments, certainly in the last few years, have been to be physically present with other people. This book was written before the pandemic. It came out in the middle of the pandemic, and I had a very isolated experience publishing the book. I couldn't do any speaking. I couldn't come to something like this and talk about it. I did a few events where I talked on Zoom, and at the end of that, the light goes off, and there you are. You're just in your room on your own again. And this it somehow seemed like my own joke was coming back to haunt me, that I was ever more isolated. But since then, I think some of the most powerful political moments for me have been in physical spaces with other people, and so that's something I find more and more powerful.
Και επειδή σε τούτο το βιβλίο διαβάζουμε για έναν άνθρωπο που φοβάται ότι τρελαίνεται, περνάει μέσα από μια πάρα πολύ ιδιαίτερη ψυχική διαδρομή. Οφείλω να ομολογήσω ότι με συγκίνησε ιδιαίτερα, πως αρκετές φορές δεν μπορούσα να ξεχωρίσω αν αυτό που του συμβαίνει είναι τρέλα ή η κοινωνική μας πραγματικότητα, πολύ απλά, έτσι, πολύ δυσδιάκριτα τα όρια, με ενδιαφέροντα τρόπο. Και ήθελα να σας ρωτήσω, ποια είναι η σχέση του ήρωά μας με τη μεταφυσική και τι θέλατε συγκεκριμένα να φέρετε στο φως μέσα από αυτές τις μυστικιστικές διαστάσεις της αναζήτησής του.
There's doubt in the book about what's in his mind and what's in external reality. And that's a theme I come back to again and again in my writing, is the way that in some ways reality can feel very plastic, very changeable to us. And he's somebody, he begins to have an obsession with the creator of this TV show. He believes that the creator is a kind of Machiavellian figure who is using this mass medium in order to promote a particular extreme right nihilist politics. And that in some way this is all addressed to him. And of course this is a structure that every paranoid person experiences. The voices are speaking to you from the television set. But then there is also something in reality that makes this possible, that makes this plausible, let's say. And he does have a breakdown. I mean, he goes to a very, very bad place, and in the final part of the book, I wanted to examine what happens to somebody in a relationship when you have broken down like that, and when you need to rebuild trust, and when you need to try and come back to the people that you love the most. And I wanted to try and paint a portrait of a man who desperately wants to be with his wife and his child, and wants her to trust him again, and wants to be part of a family again, but knows that he's not trustworthy. He has not been trustworthy, and so there's a personal level to this. There's a political level to this, and it's about his psychology and about how the world outside seems to be mirroring that. I mean, a lot of this book comes from my own habits of spending a lot of time looking at the extreme right spaces on the internet, which I have done for a long time in the spirit of knowing my enemy, I suppose. And during the 2010s, I had a very strange double experience that many of my friends who are, let's say, bourgeois creative people in New York and London were very content. They believed that their picture of the world was entirely correct. And I could see this other world kind of rising up from the internet, from the edges, and coming closer and closer and closer to the center. And I wanted to say, look, this is happening. This is coming. And then in the last few years, this has erupted into the mainstream, and ideas and people who are on the fringes are now the most powerful people and ideas in the world. And so it was as if this internet reality erupted into the rest of reality, and that experience of a kind of wall between the world on your screen and the world you're living through being broken down was part of it. And it is like going mad. I for a while I was thinking, well, am I paranoid? Is this just me spending too much time on Twitter? And sadly, no, I was quite sane.
Αυτό το μπέρδεμα είναι κάτι που αδιαμφισβήτητα μας αφορά όλες και όλους. Και θα ήταν ωραία να μας πείτε λίγο περισσότερα πράγματα σε σχέση με το αν αντλήσατε στοιχεία από άλλα πεδία της δικής σας ζωής. Είμαι σίγουρη ότι θα σας έχουν κάνει αυτή την ερώτηση ξανά. Παρατηρούμε ότι ο ήρωάς μας ζει στην Αμερική, είναι συγγραφέας, συμμετέχει σε λογοτεχνικά residencies και είναι ένας άνθρωπος που καταπιάνεται με την σύγχρονη πραγματικότητα και τον απασχολεί όλο αυτό μεταξύ εικονικής πραγματικότητας, πραγματικής πραγματικότητας. Υπάρχουν λοιπόν άλλα στοιχεία από τη δική σας ζωή που αποτέλεσαν και κομμάτια της έμπνευσης και του υλικού για το μυθιστόρημα.
I suppose the origin of the book was a very simple one. It was, I remember it was during the Syrian civil war, in the period of time when a lot of people were trying to escape in small boats, and they were coming, as you know, to Greek islands, and people were drowning. There was this very extreme situation for these people fleeing a war. And I found myself thinking, well, what if this happened to me? How would I deal with it? And the question I asked myself was, would I be able to get my family to safety if I lived in some place like this? What would I be prepared to do? Would I be strong enough to do that? And what would it mean if I wasn't strong enough? What if I couldn't protect the people that I love? And I had, at the time, my children were very young, and it was very hard, as I'm sure people here felt the same thing. It was very difficult to watch these images of small children going through this experience. And so that was a personal origin. This question of just how can you protect the people you love if history comes sweeping across your life? And I had some contact with these refugee children in Berlin, because another personal part of the story was that I did do a literary fellowship in Berlin, and I spent a couple of afternoons helping out with a sort of children's group, and meeting children aged 5, 6 years old who were so traumatized that they couldn't really speak. You were aware that they were living in a converted gymnasium. It wasn't even converted, but a gymnasium that had partitions, and many, many families were staying there because the German government had invited them to come. And this was very controversial, and many people in Germany felt that this was an invasion of foreigners and this should be resisted. And also, because of the way I look, many people I interacted with in Berlin would assume that I too was a refugee. And it was very interesting to see how they behaved towards me. Some people would be very friendly in a very exaggerated way. I would, Willkommen, hier ist Essen. And then other people would be very hostile. So I felt suddenly as if I all my privilege and all my safety, I had some sense of how it would be if my life had just been different, if I had been born in a different place. And all these different complicated feelings were part of the origin of this book, and about my own anxiety. I think this is true for a lot of writers. You take some experience you've had and you extrapolate, you turn the volume up much higher. And so, I've been lucky in that I haven't had a breakdown. I haven't had, the things that happened to this character have not happened to me. But I could imagine being in this situation of kind of extreme distress. And I could also imagine these other things to do with being a refugee, and also of being somebody who was being a victim of the secret police. These different things that are closer than we believe, I guess. I think the book is written against a sense of comfort and complacency, the sense that nothing too bad can ever happen to me because I live in a safe country, or I have money, or whatever it is. And the feeling that wall of protection is thinner than you believe. Yeah. I don't know if that is an answer to your question or not.
Ήταν πολύ ενδιαφέρον να επιμείνουμε ακόμη λίγο σε αυτή την ταξική διάσταση του έργου σας. Ως συγγραφέας, τι προσέχετε όταν δίνετε φωνή αφενός σε προνομιούχα και αφετέρου σε λιγότερο προνομιούχα υποκείμενα? Τι δυσκολίες μπορεί να εμπεριέχονται σε αυτή την προσπάθεια?
If I understand this question correctly, I suppose you're asking whether there are things that you do not have the right to imagine, or that...
Όχι απαραίτητα πως δεν έχουμε το δικαίωμα, αλλά κυρίως ρωτώ τι πρέπει να προσέξουμε για να δώσουμε φωνή με τον πιο φροντιστικό τρόπο σε υποκείμενα που μπορεί να είναι πολύ λιγότερο προνομιούχα από εμάς. Και εσείς πώς τοποθετήσετε ως συγγραφέας σε σχέση με αυτό?
I think, I suppose you have to approach other people's experience with humility. And I think you have to, one thing, an underrated skill of a novelist is the ability to listen, and the ability to imagine yourself, I suppose, into other positions, into other places. This is what I mean about almost being forced to imagine how I would behave if I had to bring my family from a war-torn country to become refugees in somewhere else. And my feeling that I might not be strong enough, or that I might not have the willpower to get them through. And I think this is what we do, and what novelists do in all situations, is you try and place yourself in some other some other situation, in some other life. But you have to do that with an understanding that that there are things that you probably don't understand. This is what I mean about humility. I think it has to be done very carefully and has to be done, as far as possible, kind of in consultation with people who have had experiences like that.
Αυτό είναι μια πάρα πολύ σωτήρια έννοια και θα ήθελα να σταθούμε και στο κομμάτι της ψυχικής νόσου με το οποίο αναμετριέται αυτή η ιστορία. Είναι ένα πολύ απαιτητικό θέμα και τι θα λέγατε ότι σας απασχόλησε σε σχέση με αυτό, πώς το προσεγγίσατε, γιατί υπάρχει μεγάλο κομμάτι του μυθιστορήματος που αναμετριέται με αυτό, με την ψυχική διαδρομή του ήρωα και το πώς αυτή η διαταραχή έρχεται κοντά και σε όλες τις παθολογίες της κοινωνικής πραγματικότητας. Το θεώρησα εξαιρετικά απαιτητικό αυτό που κάνατε. Πώς το δουλέψατε?
I feel like what I said earlier about taking something that you have actually experienced and intensifying it or extrapolating it. I have had experiences in myself that have come short of being diagnosed as mentally ill, but I've certainly understood that my own picture of the world was maybe not the correct picture of the world at a certain time. I also have had friends, particularly when I was younger, I had a number of friends who were diagnosed with severe mental illness. So I have had the experience of being around people who are having schizophrenic breaks or something like that. And of understanding again how thin the boundary between what we call sane and what we call insane actually is. I think it's easy to think that you can miss how easy it is to slide into a state of real distress or real difficulty, and I have enormous compassion for people who that happens to, and as you say, it's a difficult thing to do correctly, and all I can say is I hope I have done it with compassion.
Και σε αυτό το πλαίσιο θα ήθελα να σχολιάσετε και λίγο τον αγγλικό τίτλο του έργου σας, Red Pill.
Yes, we changed the title in Greek. The red pill is a metaphor. I think maybe some people will know the film The Matrix, which came out in 1999, and it's a science fiction movie in which a character played by the actor Keanu Reeves is given a choice. He's told the reality that you exist in is a fake reality. And it's a relatively comfortable reality. He's an office worker in a boring city that seems to be a little like Seattle, Washington. He's saying he's given a sort of guru figure, gives him a choice, holds out two pills, one in each hand. There's a red pill and a blue pill. If you take the blue pill, you'll carry on in this reality, and your experience will stay the same. But if you take the red pill, then you will see the real reality. And of course, in the film, he takes the red pill because, of course, it's an adventure and he wants to see the real. And the reality that is behind the fake reality turns out to be completely horrific. Humans are being farmed by these aliens for, and there's this. It's a place of extreme terror. Now, this idea of being, it becomes a kind of internet idea, a very popular internet idea in the 2000s, taking the red pill or being red-pilled, and it particularly starts to be the cultural property of the right. People talk about being red-pilled, meaning to stop believing in the version of the world that mainstream liberal politicians and media are selling to you. So they kind of pride themselves on saying, well, I've been red-pilled by such and such an event in my life, and I realized that I was being lied to. And it became, it actually spawned various other pills. People talk about the black pill and the clear pill. Maybe there's too much information, but there's a whole, the idea of a sudden kind of light bulb moment, a moment of clarity where you realize that the reality you're being sold is not actually, is not the real reality, has become a very, very, powerful kind of part of our culture, I think. And so calling the book Red Pill was a way of talking about this quite comfortable writer who wants to write about poetry. He wants to write about the lyric. He wants to, he believes in the value of literature, many kind of traditionally valued things. And instead, what happens to him is this experience of a sudden vision of the world, which is completely nihilistic but also possibly insane. His kind of confrontation with the possibility that he's not living in reality is deeply traumatic, and it's a political thing, it's a psychological thing, and so. I wanted to stage a political confrontation between this guy with his fairly conventional liberal politics and figures who come from something much more extreme.
Και όλα αυτά βέβαια δεν θα μπορούσαν να μην μας θυμίσουν το Matrix. Το βιβλίο σας είναι γεμάτο διακαλλιτεχνικές και διακειμενικές αναφορές, χωρίς να πρόκειται για κάποιο διανοητικό παιχνίδι. Γίνεται πραγματικά συναρπαστικό πώς ενσωματώνεται αυτό το υλικό μέσα στην αφήγηση. Και ήθελα να σας ρωτήσω, ποιες ήταν οι βασικές συνομιλήτριες, ποιοι ήταν οι βασικοί σας συνομιλητές κατά τη διάρκεια της συγγραφής του βιβλίου? Δηλαδή, μιλώ για καλλιτέχνες, για ανθρώπους που εκτιμάτε από το χώρο της διανόησης. Βλέπουμε, εκτός από το Matrix, Henry von Kleist με το μότο «Ξεκινάμε». Θα ήθελα να μας μιλήσετε λίγο για όλα αυτά.
So, with pleasure. So the character in the book has gone to Berlin to study lyric poetry. Obviously, there's a great German tradition of such poetry. We think of Goethe, we think of Heine, we think of a kind of a sort of poets who have found real beauty and one could say solace or comfort in their own experience and in describing it very perfectly. And instead of these figures, the German romantic who comes to dominate his consciousness is a different guy, a much more troubled writer, Heinrich von Kleist. And in Wannsee, this neighborhood in Berlin, is the site of Kleist's grave, and he died in a suicide pact with a young woman. And he had it turned. He was 32, I think, when he died, and this is in the very early 19th century. I think he dies in 1810 or 12 or something like that. And he had been obsessed with thoughts of suicide. He had been proposing a suicide pact, almost like people he would meet in the street virtually. Like he was obsessed with the idea of dying together with somebody else. And he's the German romantic who finds no pleasure in himself. He finds no solace, no comfort in his own interiority. He's born into this German Prussian aristocratic family, and he was very bad at everything was offered to him. He could have had any job in the Prussian military or in the administration, and he just couldn't manage to do anything right. And he writes these very fractured, strange stories and plays. They're very hectic. They're just very odd. And somehow, when I was in Berlin, just because every time I wanted to go for a walk around the lake, this is the place that I would end up at, this guy's grave. It became obvious that this was somehow part of my story, and so poor, troubled Kleist, who very probably was what we would call now an incel. It's probable that he died without having had a sexual relationship with anybody, and he couldn't quite connect with other people at all. And sorry, my daughter's in the front row. She's very embarrassed, I think, by me saying this. So yes, this difficult, troubled, sad young man was a kind of spirit hanging over this book, and he becomes connected to the central character.
Επειδή και εγώ, έτσι, για να μοιραστώ κάτι προσωπικό, εργάστηκα για ένα διάστημα κοντά στο Βάντζε, όπου ερευνά ο ήρωάς μας, μου φάνηκε καταπληκτικό το πώς αφουγκράζεται την καταστροφή και όλη την ιστορία πριν ακόμη προκύψει η τρομερή συνθήκη από ένα σημείο και μετά στο βιβλίο. Δηλαδή, όταν έχει φτάσει στο Βάντζε, ήδη όλα γυρίζουν μέσα στο μυαλό του και κάπως ήθελα να ρωτήσω, το μυθιστόρημά μας τελειώνει με τον Τραμπ να έρχεται στην εξουσία και αυτό είναι κάτι τρομακτικό από μόνο του. Ήθελα να καταλάβω πώς σκέφτεστε ότι θα μπορούσε να αισθάνεται αυτός ο ήρωας σήμερα, μετά από τόσο καιρό που αυτό έχει συμβεί. Αν τον φέρναμε στο τώρα, τι πιστεύετε ότι θα αισθανόταν?
I guess he would feel more integrated. The different parts of his world have come together, and we've taken the red pill, and we are in a nightmare. But at least we're all there together, and we know that we're sane. I mean, this character is almost looking for a chance to have his breakdown, a setting for his breakdown. I'll ask you a question. Were you working at the Literary Institute next to the American Academy? Yes, there's a very funny passage of Roberto Bolaño where he's working in the place that you were working, and he hated it. He had a bad time there as well. I think there's too much history around that lake. It gets to everybody. There's so many layers. You can never escape the past of Europe in that place. And I mean, I think this book has in a way, it has a bleak ending and a hopeful ending at the same time. The character has come back from his breakdown, and he does have a possibility of making a future, where he will reintegrate his family, where he will be able to move on. But also, the world around him is heading towards a place of darkness. And with the second Trump administration now, I think many of the things that I felt slightly paranoid imagining as part of the future are now part of our reality.
Και νομίζω δεν θα μπορούσαμε παρά να σταθούμε και στις γυναίκες του βιβλίου. Παρεμβάλλεται η αφήγηση της Μόνικα, που έτσι μπλέχτηκε με την ιστορία του ολοκληρωτισμού με όλους τους τρόπους που δεν ήθελε να μπλεχτεί. Και έχουμε και τη Ρέι, τη σύντροφο του συγγραφέα μας, η οποία κρατά μια πολύ συγκεκριμένη στάση, υπομονετική, ενώ ταυτόχρονα οδυνάται. Και έτσι θα ήθελα να σας ρωτήσω, τι σας ενδιαφέρει σε σχέση με την έμφυλη διάσταση κομματιών της ιστορίας και τα κρίσιμα θέματα στις σχέσεις και ό,τι αφορά το κομμάτι του φύλου στο έργο σας?
These two very different women. Monica was a young woman growing up in East Germany, as it was in the 1970s. She was a rebellious young woman who became part of the East Berlin punk scene. And this was a fascinating subculture that I found out more about when I went to live in Berlin, that actually young people who had very little access to culture from the other side of the wall, of the other side of the Iron Curtain, became punks. Sometimes just through seeing a picture of a punk band or hearing one or two songs by some of the British or American bands, or indeed the German bands that were in Berlin at the time. But the East German authorities were convinced that punk was a plot, was part of a plot directed by Western intelligence services to undermine the moral fiber of young East Germans. They were supposed to be the workers and farmers state. They were supposed to be, the official image of young people in East Germany was of the youth movement, the young pioneers. They were supposed to be, happily singing songs together and working to build the state. And so to be a punk, to say there's no future, there's no, that we don't want this, was extremely transgressive. And for the podcast I made, I actually interviewed one of the first punks in East Berlin, and he said, well, in a funny way, the Western punks were saying there was no future. We were saying there was too much future. Our entire future was planned out for us, and we were horrified by that. But there were a lot of women involved in this world, and there were all-female bands, but because the state was so worried about them, they would sometimes force people to become informers, or even plant intelligence agents in punk bands. There was one band where they found that 2 of the 4 members were actually Stasi officers. So it was a strange, paranoid world. And this woman in my book, Monica, she becomes the victim of a very profound kind of crime that the Stasi would do against dissidents, which was there's a German word which means something like undermining or dissolution, where they would almost deliberately induce feelings of paranoia in individuals. They would, by doing strange things, they would go into your apartment while you were out and move things around. They would make sure if you went to post a letter that the letter would be lost. There were just these petty things, like tricks or jokes, but with this constantly happening to people, and people understanding that they were being watched and that people were messing with them. And so she has, I won't say the whole story, but she's been the victim of this, and her subsequent life has been very restricted and very damaged by the experience of this. And then the second character you mentioned, Ray, who is the wife of the narrator, he has been impossible to live with for a long time before the events of the book. He's been unhappy. He's been preoccupied with watching images from images of refugees, images of disaster at home. And she said, and he's been unable to write. And she said to him, "We have a small child. I have a demanding job, but you need to sort yourself out. So why don't I give you this time? I'm going to, I'll hold things down here at home. You go off and you make something. You go and do the thing that you're supposed to be doing." And the thing that he finds most terrible about his failure to do this is that he knows that the worse he gets, and the fact that the further away he gets from being able to work, is a kind of he doesn't know how he can face her and say, I've wasted all this time and I haven't done the thing that I went to do. And he wants to be the man she fell in love with, and he wants to be the worthy of her, and the worse things get for him, the more distant he feels from her. She's mostly off stage. She's more involved in the narrative of the book at the end, when he's trying to work out how to put back the pieces of their relationship. But I don't know if I have any kind of overarching point to make about gender with either of these characters, but they are women with very different experiences from the narrator, and I wanted to have them in there because they're, he is a narcissist. He is a male narcissist, and I wanted something that would kind of maybe put his internal struggles into perspective.
Και όλα αυτά σε μία πλοκή πραγματικά καταιγιστική, με την ιστορία σε πρωταγωνιστικό ρόλο, με τα γεγονότα να περνούν από μπροστά μας πραγματικά σαν να βλέπουμε ταινία. Έτσι, θα ήθελα να μας πείτε αν έχετε κάποιο αγαπημένο κομμάτι από το βιβλίο αυτό, δηλαδή ένα μέρος του που ξεχωρίζετε και για ποιο λόγο, τι θα σχολιάζατε πάνω σε αυτό.
I mean, I actually like Monica's story. It's the story of the East German punks that forms a kind of hinge in the book, a break in the two halves of the book. I enjoyed writing it. I enjoyed discovering that world and thinking about what it was like to be her, and that was actually published in some form in the New Yorker as a separate piece, so it has a life maybe outside the novel as well.
Έχουμε αυτή τη στιγμή 6 λεπτά. Νομίζω ότι μπορούμε να δώσουμε το λόγο και στο κοινό, αν θα ήθελε κάτι να ρωτήσει τον κύριο Kunzru, ο οποίος πραγματικά ανταποκρίνεται στις ερωτήσεις, όπως βλέπουμε όλοι, σε βάθος, όχι επιφανειακά. Οπότε νομίζω είναι καλή στιγμή να αδράξουμε αυτή την ευκαιρία και να δώσουμε το μικρόφωνο. Αλλιώς, εγώ έχω πάντα και άλλα πράγματα να ρωτήσω, πάρα πολλά για την ακρίβεια. Θα ήθελε κάποια ή κάποιος να μοιραστεί ένα ερώτημα ή να κάνει ένα σχόλιο.
We've embarrassed everybody.
Επεξεργάζονται τα δεδομένα, νομίζω, οπότε θα πάρω την ευκαιρία, κύριε Kunzru, να σας ρωτήσω κάτι ακόμα. Και θα ήθελα να σας ρωτήσω συγκεκριμένα, επειδή καταπιάνεστε με τόσο σύγχρονα θέματα στο έργο σας και μάλιστα βλέπουμε και τη φιλοσοφία παρούσα και την ιστορία, δηλαδή οι επιστήμες κοντά στην τέχνη. Και θα ήθελα να μας πείτε αν θεωρείτε επικίνδυνο οι λογοτέχνες σήμερα να ασχολούνται με τα εντελώς σύγχρονα με τη ζωή μας θέματα. Αν εσείς διστάζετε ποτέ μπροστά στο ενδεχόμενο να επεξεργαστείτε λογοτεχνικά κάτι που συμβαίνει στο εδώ και τώρα.
I think it's the job of the novelist to try and reflect the world, and we live in a technical world. We live in a world where technology is culture, and I've always been interested in the way that technology has shaped us. I used to work as a technology journalist for a while, so I've had a lot to do with especially Silicon Valley and new technologies coming from there. But I feel, what's the point of a novelist who doesn't try and grasp reality in full?
Σας ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ για αυτή τη συζήτηση και νομίζω ότι αυτό το βιβλίο ευαισθητοποιεί για θέματα που θα κουβεντιάσετε και στην εκδήλωση στην οποία θα συμμετέχετε το Σάββατο και έτσι θα έχουμε την ευκαιρία να σας ρωτήσουμε εκεί όσα δεν σας ρωτήσαμε σήμερα.
Thank you so much, and thank you for listening. Yeah.